Are we still not live?
You are
We
live.
are.
We are live, but we're giving some time for the
People to log in. This information is for participants. I can see people are still joining in, so we give few more minutes for people to join in. Sir, proceeding is being recorded, right, sir? Yeah, okay, fine. So I think, should we make a start, Dr. Mahesh?
I think we should begin.
We should begin, yeah, okay, right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this Tele Arogya webinar series. This one is dedicated for academic, totally academic section. And we have eminent panel with us. And so I'll just give you ground rules. Unfortunately, these type of webinars don't allow you to ask questions, verbally here, but you're able to type and still participate. We try our best to include you in the discussion, and totally it is all led by you. So we are very thankful to your participation. And if you see at the bottom of your screen, there is Q&A section where you are able to post your questions. And please, next to your question, you also put your name and the place where you are from. And also in the chat box, you're welcome to exchange any messages with any panelists you like. Okay. With this information, and I must thank Mr. Ganeshan from Microlabs to having for supporting this programs, and we are very grateful to him. And with this, I have my colleague Dr. Mahesh, who is also a coordinator for this these sessions. And without taking much of your time, I'll hand over to Dr. Mahesh, who will set the proceedings right here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay, for this introduction of this program. Today is a special day for us, and I would like to welcome you for this special session on actually papers being submitted and rejection. So how do we actually handle this sort of rejection is the prime motto that we're going to deal today. Today we have none other than Dr. Prasad Rao, who's going to be a chairperson for today's program. Dr. Prasad Rao has been the president of IPS, is the current president of IAPP. He's held various positions at South Zone, state level, and finally reached to national level. He's an extremely busy practitioner and also busy in his academics at DNB program at Asha Hospital. Welcome, Dr. Prasad Rao, sir.
Thank you very much.
Just to add, is due to complete his PhD in dementia. That's something we need to.
Yeah. Thank you, Vijay, for making sure you add that. That's really wonderful. Sir, at the fag end of the innings, wants to do his PhD to sign it off well.
It is not fag end. He will go on.
Yes, I would like to welcome Professor Dr. Sandeep Grover for today's program. Dr. Grover is a faculty at PGI Chandigarh, and he's been active at the level of all the academic journals. He has more than 450 publications at various national and international journals. He is associated with IJP as an associate editor. He is also a part of the Indian Journal of Psychological Medicine. He also is an editor at Mental Health and Human Behavior related journal, and also editor of Geriatric Mental Health. Dr. Sandeep Grover has vast experience not only in writing up so many journals, but also has done extensive review for so many articles before it's been published. So I think none other than Dr. Sandeep Grover can be a very good moderator for today's program. Welcome, Dr. Sandeep Grover.
Thank you, Dr. Mahesh, for the kind words. It's my pleasure to invite two of my best friends, Professor O.P. Singh and Professor Venkat, for this webinar. All of us know Professor O.P. Singh. He is the editor of Indian Journal of Psychiatry, and he is the professor of psychiatry in NRS Medical College, Calcutta. A very, very humble man. And under his leadership, the IJP is moving very, very well. And in fact, he has smoothened the path of the journal that nowadays most of you will realize that you're getting your responses and the comments in well within time. So it's my pleasure to introduce you, Professor O.P. Singh.
Thank you, Sandeep. And you are the backbone of all the journals.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. And then I have with me Professor Venkat Subramaniam. He is Professor of Psychiatry at NIMHANS. He is the biological psychiatry person of the country. If anybody who has introduced or moved biological psychiatry in this country, then one name only comes to the mind of everyone. It is Dr. Venkat Subramaniam. So I think he is the flagship person for biological psychiatry in India, and we all look forward to him as far as biological research in psychiatry is concerned. And he has done a lot of innovation in biological psychiatry in this country and has at least made us, all of us, proud in terms of how the research can be done in the lab. He's also the associate editor of Asian Journal of Psychiatry, which is another journal where many of the Indians prefer to publish their articles. So welcome, Professor Venkat. Please unmute yourself. Professor Venkat, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks,
Now,
Dr. Sandeep. I think it was a very generous
May I take
introduction.
1 minute, Venkat, for just 1 minute?
Yes, sir.
As a chairperson, I'll just take less than a minute. See, we have not introduced Sandeep Grover in a proper way, and that's what I feel. See, this is a real good panel with the three people who are the real backbone of research and publication. Sandeep Grover, as far as I know, for 16 years to 18 years, correct me if I'm wrong on 1 or 2 years, has been really driving the Indian Journal of Psychiatry. He has been an active member. And O.P. Singh, my dear friend, has taken over the mantle, and he has really, as Sandeep put it, has taken it a great thing. And then we have an eminent researcher who has published in multiple international journals, and he is on the board of multiple international journals. So I think we cannot choose a better panel than this. And just one more thing, with a very, very personal note. My first publication was way back in 1981, and incidentally, the first one got accepted in IJPM, but the second two journal articles have been sent for 3 reviews. During those days, it used to be this. I think times have changed, and I would thank the Indian Journal of Psychiatry, especially Sandeep Grover, currently O.P. Singh, and the other editorial team, who have made our life so clear that you send a mail, you upload, and he sends back. With this very brief note, I welcome, and I'm sure a lot of youngsters are waiting to ask a lot of questions. Sir, how should my paper be accepted, and how should my
Okay. So as we had an option of taking few questions by email, so before people type their questions, whatever the questions which I have received, I will start from there. So this is the question to Dr. O.P. Singh, that when any manuscript is submitted to the journal and you as an editor, what do you look in that manuscript before you consider that further?
First, as an editor, I look into that whether it is relevant, topic is relevant or not, then whether it is in the scope of our journal or not. And again, as an editor, it is always we are greedy person, so always we think that whether it will get citation or not. So that is one of the outlooks for our editor. Then we see the aim of the study and whether it is adding anything knowledge, any knowledge to the existing knowledge or not. Then whether methodology is all right or not, gross overview of the methodology.
Yeah.
And then whether again citation. And another thing is sometimes like we are the journal of the society. So sometimes you also think that whether this will be interesting to the society members who are our readers. That again becomes an idea in our mind, whether it may not get citations, but will be interesting to the people who are reading this. So this comes. And then we go for, as a whole, that whether the legal requirements like ISC, trial registry, funding, on all those things are there or not. So this is the brief overview when we first decide whether to send it for review or reject at our level.
Okay. Thank you, Professor O.P. Singh, for this wonderful explanation how a manuscript is initially screened. So Dr. Venkat, can you still take up the same questions for how do you look at any publication which is submitted to any journal wherever you are involved, especially the Asian Journal of Psychiatry?
Yeah, I think most of the important points Professor O.P. Singh has covered nicely. Perhaps in addition to several important points Professor Singh summarized, maybe the way in which the manuscript is written is one other factor which is considered. But it is not the only factor with which a major decision is taken, but that is one of the factors.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Professor Venkat. Next question is for Professor Venkat only. What are the most common reasons for rejection of any manuscript?
Yeah, I think it is a very important question. First and foremost will be, as Professor O.P. Singh was mentioning, the scope of the journal and the relevance of the article that is being submitted. So that is the first and foremost, because if we find the article is out of scope and it is not so much of relevance, then it is very unlikely to cross the editor's desk. So that is perhaps one of the very important factors I would emphasize. Then comes in a very crisp way, perhaps if the importance of the article and the novelty and the new information it adds is something which is, if it is very well emphasized, then that is something which is taken very, very positively. If we are unable to find something new, or the way in which it is presented seems to be more of what is already known, then that is another important factor that perhaps will lead to rejection. The third aspect is the way in which the overall article is organized, because as editors, as we all know, that when we handle too many manuscripts, many a time we have to take a decision within a short time. So if the article is not very well organized and it is also not very much aligning with the scope, it is plus minus within the scope and the novelty is plus minus, then the organization is not okay, then things will go negative. On the other hand, even if the first two factors are plus minus 50-50 and the article is quite well organized and well written, it is likely that I may consider getting it reviewed. So these are some of the initial thoughts I had.
Yeah. Thank you, Venkat. This question is for Professor O.P. Singh. What is your advice to someone who is a very young researcher, who is starting his academic career, how to plan to write a manuscript, what he should be doing right so that his manuscript is more likely to be accepted?
Basic question is that whether starting of the research we do not think. That is the main problem when we start a research. We do not think of publishing it because of thesis or other work. We take it, but the basic question is that the three questions everybody has to ask when we are going to submit it. The first question is that what is your aim of the study, whether it is useful, what you are adding to it, and how you are going about it. What is your methodology? These three things are very much important. So first they have to satisfy themselves that, okay, I want this question. What is my research question? That should be very clear in their mind. What is the research question? And then how they are going about answering that research question. And then whether this will be relevant and interest to other people who will want to read it, or whether it will add to the existing knowledge or provide some insight to the, like internationally it is available. So people say that it is from India or from Karnataka or from West Bengal. Then you have to emphasize that what is peculiar in that area, which makes it different from the as a whole international area. So beforehand, when you going to start a research, you have to think of these points before you do that. And then already you know that when you are going to write, already Dr. Subramaniam has covered that writing should be good. And fortunately, there is a lot of help available now on internet. So there are guidelines, you know, the Equator guidelines, Prisma, Moo's guideline, CARE. So for every kind of research, there is a guideline. So we'll try to fit into that, because that will make your article quite readable, and also this will help as a checklist. So that is important. And then what, for me, it is very important, what we found that may be very objectionable. We try to overstate a lot of findings. Like our finding is this: when we discuss, we draw inference which is much beyond our scope of what we have found. So try to limit, try to be humble in submitting what you are doing, and try to restrict your discussion and your inferences based on your data, rather than a lot of hypotheses you bring into that. And again, be truthful. It is very important. We know that sometimes you get away with the falsifying data, but editors also has a way, like Al Capone, that they cannot get him on murder charge, so they get him on financial irregularities. So if you are identified as a person who does not is not truthful, that becomes problem for your future. So try to be truthful, humble, try to say your limitations, because in India, most of the time we try to take articles who are good in methodology, bring something new. We try to encourage people who are particularly not in institutions, who do not have the same infrastructure, but the truthfulness is very important.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. O.P. Singh. Professor Venkat, this question is for you, that because in India, many people try to carry out the research by going to the articles published in international journals. So many of the studies become at one level replication studies. So what would be you advise people who are planning to do some kind of replication work, some kind of work which has been already done in some other country or some other place, they're just trying to replicate the work. So what additional they can do so that the work becomes publishable?
Yeah, I think it's a very critical question, in the sense, like, it is a conundrum, in the sense when I say that a manuscript should be novel, at the same time, what defines a novelty? Because many a time the research that is planned, there would have been something similar which would have happened earlier. So in that context, at one level, we need to see replication. If we are thinking how many times it has been replicated, and more so in a setting like ours. So that is the first question I would ask if I have to plan a study where I'm trying to replicate a finding. The second question I will ask is, what is the relevance of it to be replicated? Are there any factors that will suggest that unless otherwise we replicate, we cannot definitively conclude the findings that were seen in a different population are applicable to ours. So that is number two. Number three is, even if the first two questions, say for instance, that there are few replications which have already happened, and we are looking at, say, looking at examining the utility of a drug in our population, it will still be useful if there is an immense clinical significance in terms of the cost of the medications, or there are some factors that suggest the risk profile or the kind of side effect it can cause in Indian population might be different. So basically looking at these aspects is something which will help us to decide whether we need indeed to replicate.
So basically what Professor Venkat has emphasized, that although you are trying to do replication of the study, I think have some innovative component along with that to suggest that why replication is important, and the innovation can involve cultural issues, can involve the methodological issues in terms of pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, which all can vary from country to country. This is the question for both of you, in fact. Is there an increase in the number of manuscripts submitted to the journals during this COVID time? Yeah, so Professor O.P. Singh is smiling, so I like him to answer this question first.
No, because of course, like if I take the cutoff of 22nd March,
yeah,
so we have 250 submissions.
Yeah.
And now we have 693 or 695. Sir, our website is not working properly for 2 days, so it may have crossed 700. So 250 in 3 months, and next 2.5 months we are having 500 almost. So it has doubled clearly.
Yeah.
So people have time on their hands, so they are writing. Even reviews are faster.
Okay. Professor Venkat, so what's your experience with the journals where you are associated about the number of submissions?
Yes, it has immensely increased.
Yeah.
There is several-fold increase. Professor Rajiv Tandon, as we know, is the editor-in-chief of the Asian Journal. So he will assign manuscripts to me to handle, on weekly basis. So the numbers I would have, I will say it is about 4 times than what I was getting earlier.
Yeah.
So it's a tremendous increase. I concur with what Professor O.P. Singh mentioned. So the number of submissions have vastly increased.
Okay. So because again, we are dealing in the COVID era. So are the submissions related to COVID? And if they are related, what kind of COVID related manuscripts are being submitted to, let's say, Asian Journal of Psychiatry? Professor Venkat?
Yeah, so a large proportion of the submissions have COVID as the theme. I would say that 3/4 of the papers or the new submissions that have happened, the increase has happened because of the COVID-related thematic focus. The type of articles that we get are predominantly, say, opinion pieces, either in the form of a correspondence or in the form of a short overview. The second common type of articles that I have been handling, it involves review articles. A third is the set of articles which look at surveys in terms of different mental health issues. So these are the 3 major categories I can think of.
Okay, thank you. Professor O.P. Singh?
We are having all kind of articles. We have a lot of original research and also review articles, opinions or viewpoints, letter to editor. Because what is happening, a lot of people are, there is so much less research that people have time, they get information from a lot of sources and write an piece of viewpoint or kind of correspondence. So this is happening. But at the same time, first issue, we did some accelerated research. And after that, we have a lot of articles which are research oriented. So we are having all kinds of article. And again, viewpoints we are getting viewpoints from a lot of people, like anatomy people who are writing viewpoints on the psychological factors in COVID. So these things are also happening. Though we do not I must say that we do not encourage this kind of viewpoints, because someone who has something to offer should be offering a viewpoint. So all kinds of articles are being submitted.
Yeah, thank you. Venkat, this is the question for you. If you are an author and you want to write an article on COVID, which you want that it should be published and should be given high priority, how would you work on a manuscript to look at that? How would you approach a manuscript related to COVID?
Yeah, I think this is a thought which I keep getting whenever I see a manuscript for review. So what I would say is, maybe first and foremost, I would think what is the relevance of that particular art theme or the idea I have got with regards to the COVID. The second important aspect I would seriously consider is what Professor O.P. Singh mentioned. Am I the right specialist? Have I been working in that area? Do I have enough and in-depth background reading to make such a perspective or an overview? Because the point which Professor Singh mentioned is very profound, because as he rightly pointed out, we get people from different specialities commenting on some other speciality. Not that they should not do it. It should be done with requisite background work, and that is something which I would seriously consider. The third aspect is how convincing is my argument or my view. And if at all I'm going to do some kind of research, I would rather plan it in a systematic way and try to do it little as much comprehensively as possible. Of course, we have to balance it with the timeliness of the research. So if I'm going to compromise on certain aspects of the methodology, then I will give very clear justification why I have compromised in the context of this emergencies related to the pandemic. So the two types of articles one can think of could be a perspective overview or an opinion, which initial part of my comment covered. Whereas if I'm looking at original research, I will think of doing something very substantial, but we also know we need to balance between the timeliness of the research and the comprehensiveness of the methodology, and I will try to balance. And then I will target the right journal, looking at the scope.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. O.P. Singh, so how you yourself look at yourself as an author if you are planning to write something on COVID?
No, first
because you wrote the editorial on migrants.
Yeah. So first of thing is that I am not a very avid researcher, but as a reader, what I will want to read. So I will think in that perspective. The first thing is, what is the COVID bringing difficult? What is the difference from the normal? So that is the point which should be researched. The first thing, what are the things which are different due to COVID or due to lockdown? So like ideas like how people are getting their medication, if they're not getting medication, what is happening to their relapse, or what strategy they are employing to cover it, how their service is being delivered to them, or how they are taking that, because prevalence studies are almost now over. Most of people are doing what is anxiety, depression. They are almost done by many people now. So you have to think of other questions. A migratory area is one of the, in India, it is one of the major area where real research is required. What is happening to them? What was their mindset when they were moving? Because sometimes they were getting food, they were getting other facilities, but still they wanted to go home. So this psychological perspective of migrant, this kind of things has to be covered. So basically we should think that how lockdown or COVID has changed the life of the patients, of the doctors, of the other people, and what is their impact in different areas. And so we should choose those areas one by one.
Okay, thank you. Professor Venkat, because both of you, I am sure that both of you are encountering this, that there are a lot of online surveys which have occurred in the COVID era. So
yes.
My question to you is that how do you look at the manuscript of various surveys submitted to the journal, and how do you move about in approaching these manuscripts?
Yeah, I think this is a tight question in the sense when we look at the survey-based manuscripts, uh, uh, while it reflects the enthusiasm and wanting to uncover something which is very, very significant coming from the author, at the same time, we also look at how effectively the survey has been done, especially looking at the generalizability of the observations, as well as looking at how comprehensively the survey has been conducted, because we are also aware that conducting face-to-face research in the context of COVID situation is very challenging. Yet at the same time, we need to balance face-to-face versus survey, especially looking at the focus of the article and the kind of population that the article addresses.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. O.P. Singh, because again, a lot of surveys are being submitted to IJP. So how do you look at these surveys and how are you approaching this? What would be your advice to the authors when before they submit their surveys to the journal?
The first thing is that the surveys we have to take in this area this time because they are providing some answers where there is no answer. So that's importance of surveys. But there are two things which are very important. The first is the questionnaire, whether it is self-made or already some validated questionnaire is being used, or scales. A lot of people are using self-made scales, which has not been validated. That becomes one limitation. Then the population of the surveys, whether it is being circulated in which group, and if we want generalizability, so whether it is mainly doctors population or medical students population. So that is one concern, that what is the population for the survey, and of course response rate and the number of responses. How many sample size should be the more than the what we call face-to-face research. There should be much more for the surveys. So these are the 3-4 things which we are looking for.
Okay. The next question is for Dr. Venkat, that if my COVID-related manuscript is rejected, what should I be doing next?
Yeah, I think since the number of submissions related to I would think it is natural that the rejections are also going to be proportionately more. So it is highly likely a COVID-related article will be rejected than a non-COVID. So that is the first thing I would say to myself as an author. The second question I will ask is whether there has been any comments that have been given. Since the number of submissions are too many, there are occasions that we may not be able to get reviewer comments, because with so many submissions, and as we all know, getting good quality reviews is also quite difficult. Getting review, I think we had a good discussion in the EIPS in the past few weeks about the role of reviewers. So we know that reviews are also quite difficult to obtain. So many a time when the submission numbers increase, the editors will just reject without any comments. So as an author, I should be prepared for that. Perhaps if the article is rejected, as an author, I may probably check with some of my colleagues. I will ask some of my colleagues, give the manuscript, make them read, and then try and give get their reflections on it. And as Professor O.P. Singh rightly pointed out, is it a manuscript which many readers would like to read of that particular journal? That is one important comment. Perhaps I have to get it even before submission, or at least after rejection, I would definitely get.
Okay. Thank you. There's another important issue which is arising in this COVID era, Professor O.P. Singh, is about the ethical clearance. And many people are trying to talk about ethical clearance, is it feasible, not feasible. But as an editor, how do you look at the issue of ethical clearance during the COVID era?
This is the most problematic area, but ethical clearance has to be there, and ICMR has now come out with guideline how to take ethical clearance in times of COVID era. So online ethical clearance and all those things are important.
Okay. The another issue which is again there, that nowadays people have writing a lot of letter to editor against each other in this COVID era, and actually that it's appearing like people are fighting on social media by this letter to editor writing against each other. It has happened for many of the articles. So as an editor, how do you look at these letter to editors, and what would you tell the young researchers or people, those are very enthusiastic about writing these letter to editors? What are you going to advise them?
Now, we want that letters to editors should be submitted, but they should focus on the criticizing or praising the scientific methodology and limiting themselves to the scientific methods rather than putting down the research. So that is one area. It should not become personal, and no brownie point is being scored on that. But of course, they should point out the deficiencies also. And we at the editorial team also look into that, whether these deficiencies are there or not, or whether there has been some laxity on our part or not. So these letter to editor criticizing an article is important, and we want them to encourage, but of course that should be based on the methodology and very scientific things.
Yeah. Dr. Venkat, how do you respond to this question?
Yeah, I concur with Professor Singh's comments. I think he aptly summarized. So we have to be very careful in the focus. That is, the focus should be the science and the methods. And even when we focus and critique the science and method, I would say, like as an author, I have to be very careful in the kind of language I use.
Okay, thank you. Now, there's one issue, because we are getting a lot of viewpoint and a lot of review articles. One of the issue again, which is coming up and which authors just want to know, is about the plagiarism. So how do you look at plagiarism? What level of plagiarism do you accept, or which is not accepted, and what would be the percentage which the author should keep in mind? This question is for maybe Professor O.P. Singh can take, then Venkat can also take up the same for the other journal.
So max to max is 10 to 15%.
Yeah.
We cannot, and then again the same source, the guideline says 3% from the same source. So it should not be more than 3% from the same source, and not should be more than 15%. Even it is if your own article. A lot of people think that if it is my article, I can just copy from there. So we should be cautious about that, and particularly in viewpoints and others, because in original research there is very less chance of this plagiarism, but there is review articles, there is a high chance. And another problem we are facing is reviews being submitted, which are like basically we have a policy of invited reviews, but we take reviews from anyone who submits it if it is good. But the problem is that people are submitting seminars as reviews. So they have to learn that reviews are something different. And maybe as MCI wants, we should encourage only systematic review and meta-analysis, and probably not review articles from the authors. I am just saying it on this openly on this platform.
Thank you. Dr. Venkat, your comments on the same?
Yeah, I think the plagiarism limits, what Professor Singh mentioned, is very apt. There are occasions where the percentage might slightly be more. Then specifically what I look for is, are there chunks of sentences that kind of gets entirely replicated? Because there are occasions where certain methodological sections, especially if it involves technical term, may be picked up as a greater percentage, but it will be scattered across the manuscript. But if entire paragraph wise it gets picked up as an overlap by the software, then it's a matter of concern.
Okay. Okay. I have one more question. This is again most important from the research perspective. Dr. Venkat, some of the people have asked that what should they be doing when they don't have a mentor around to help them to write their manuscripts. So what would you advise them, like if they have a mentor, how they should go about, and if they don't have a mentor, how should they go about while they are drafting their manuscripts?
I think especially for early career researchers, mentors are very important. It is not very difficult to get a mentor, even if one is not within the institute. So first and foremost, I would suggest to try and seek out and write to senior researchers. It's not that all senior researchers may agree, but there is a proportion who may agree. So that is to get a mentor, especially if we don't have a mentor within the institute, number one. Number two, even after that, if I am unable to find a mentor, then perhaps the best way in which I can go about will be like Dr. Singh mentioned, there are many sources which will help us to learn how to write, number one. Number two, I will also carefully go through similar articles that are published very recently by ensuring that I'm not verbatim repeating those articles. Try and see I follow the principles of how those recently published articles are organized and how it is communicated. Perhaps I will also start taking help of softwares like Grammarly. You know, a component of Grammarly is available free, which is quite sufficient to avoid many of the basic mistakes, and that can be integrated in the Word software, and I start writing. And maybe as a young researcher, I will start working with case reports first, and then develop further into case series, and then original research, especially if I do not have a mentor. The learning curve might take a little longer to begin with, but in some ways, a mentorless journey, if I'm able to kind of correct myself over the course of time, I may pick up speed much faster than many others who might have got a mentor. Or there is also a possibility sometimes mentors' influence might take away my originality. So when I'm getting mentored, I also need to be careful that my originality is not lost.
Yeah, that's very, very important. Dr. O.P. Singh, what is your advice to the mentors, how they should mentor the young researchers? Because in India, we have very few people doing this job efficiently.
Actually, you know, Sandeep, we talked about it. We wanted to form a platform of mentors for the people. IJP has this idea in mind and we will be doing it. But problem is that the few people are there who are also reviewing. They are the people who are doing for most of the journals, and they are the mentors. So for them, time is very essential. That becomes a handicap, but we will work on this, that even the institutes where there is no mentor available, they should be getting help from others. Because in India, people are quite generous, and I think Sandeep and others are very generous to mentor anyone. So that is the first thing. Second thing, as myself see it, first we have to pass the editorial review. If you write according to some criteria, follow some checklist and pass the editor review, and then it is reviewed, then we'll get a lot of comments from the reviewers. So that will help us correct, and maybe even if rejected, we modify those comments and send it to another journal. And that's why we learn from our own mistakes. But the basic thing is to go past the initial editorial review. So for that, you need to follow the, as Dr. Venkat Subramaniam said, that first, like Grammarly and others, language and the checklist, if they are correct, then you may pass the editorial review and go for review, where you will get the comments.
Okay. This is the question for Venkat. What is your tips or so-called checklist for the young researchers when they are starting a research, that they should keep in mind that at the end they're going to publish it? So from that point of view, what all you would advise them not to do so that the research becomes publishable?
Right. So if I have to start my research career and look at doing things afresh, maybe these are things which I will definitely do. Before starting a research, I will do a thorough review of the existing status and make sure what I want to do has either novelty or there is a compelling need to replicate that research. So that is number one. Number two, I will also look at how methodologically feasible and how foolproof my design is going to be, to the extent that even if I end up with a negative finding, I should still be able to publish it. So that is number two. And number three will be that what are all the challenges that I am likely to foresee, and in case if those challenges happen, what are all the course corrections or what are the alternatives that I have so that I have plan B, plan C, and so forth. And that is the context in which I will also look at whether I can get good mentors in that area and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you. Dr. O.P. Singh, how much it is important that the authors need to think about the length of their article? How much does that make a difference in accepting or rejecting an article?
The first thing is that there is clearly written instructions of every journal that it should be in proper length, that length should not exceed this. So that we should follow, because what happens that it leads to some kind of irritation when your length is higher. But we still do not reject based on the length, because we're then sent for review and ask the writer to decrease it, rather than saying that we will not accept it. But this is a very negative point which should be avoided, because there is very clear-cut guideline what should be the length. And if you are not following that, it means that you are not paying attention to the instructions and you are not serious about your writing. And that gives a very bad impression to the reviewer and to the editor. But since, again, I said that we are society journal, so we try to encourage and then send back and then say that, okay, decrease the length, try to put into this. But we should take care of that length should not exceed.
Okay. Venkat, this question is for you as an editor. When you look at a paper being submitted to your journal, the first author is a young researcher. Maybe it is part of his thesis or somebody who has submitted this paper. And vis-a-vis first author or the senior author is a person who is well-established researcher. So how do you approach this dilemma at that time for the same kind of a manuscript or same quality of manuscript?
Sorry, the first author is a young researcher.
Vis-a-vis first author is a well-established researcher. So does that make any difference in considering a manuscript further?
The yardsticks, in my view, are more or less going to be the same.
Okay.
Mainly because of the limited number of articles that can be accepted.
Okay.
Whereas, like if the only difference I would probably have in the responses, when we are communicating the decision, there is also a place where we put our editorial comments in addition to the reviewer's comment. Perhaps in a young researcher, I will ensure that the person doesn't get too disappointed or too frustrated in case if the outcome is going to be negative. And sometimes there is also the policy of the Elsevier, where we can offer the transfer of the article to a different journal. So those things might be actively thought, especially for a person who's young in their career, young and early in their career.
Okay. Thank you. Venkat, again, the next question is for you, because you have been recently publishing in very many international journals. So whenever you complete a research, how do you go about selecting a journal for your manuscript?
Yeah, I think that is very important. As Dr. O.P. Singh pointed out, the scope and relevance. So identifying the right journal is quite significant. So what I do is I just look at what are the journals that are publishing articles in that area. Say, for instance, I completed research on transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS. Let me look at the journals which have published the TDCS research in the last couple of years, and then identify those journals and look at, that would be journals which might be focusing primarily on clinical aspects. Sometimes it will be on biological aspect. So that will help me to have a subclassification. Once I zero down on 2 or 3 journals, then go by the impact factor of the journal and then decide and submit.
So do you start from higher impact factor, or you start from the middle one or the lower one?
It depends upon the finding. If I think the finding is very profound, I would be greedy to get it published in the highest impact factor possible. But at the same time, if the finding is not so profound. It is more of a replication. I would rather want to get it published rather than wait and lose the opportunity in case if more replications happen.
Okay, thank you. And the next question which I have for you, both of you, because that is another issue which comes in many a times, that when a manuscript is sent back to the authors for revision, how often do you find that the authors have not followed the comments of the reviewers and that they have done a good job or a sloppy job, and how much that influences your decision? Dr. O.P. Singh first.
Still, we found that 15 to 20% of people do not follow the reviewers' comments somehow or other. And obviously that puts us in a dilemma, because we have to send to the same reviewer, and reviewer sees that their comments are not being followed. Of course, he becomes very annoyed. And as said, we have sort of reviewers. We cannot afford to have annoyed reviewers. So obviously that goes negatively against this. But one thing is there, if you find that reviewers' comments are one-sided or something, you can always contest this with scientific fact. And we as an editorial team, we will look into that and try to objectively assess. So that is very fine, that you can counter the reviewers' comments, but not following in the forms of language, not following format, and all those things which a lot of reviewers take a lot of pain to write to them, that you should correct these things like this way. In fact, they show the way. Some of the people, I know that they correct the whole manuscript, but still people do not give enough attention. Obviously that goes for rejection.
Okay. Professor Venkat?
Yeah, I concur with all the points what Professor Singh mentioned. So the reviewers give so much of their time to review and give the comments. So if there are occasions where the reviewer has suggested major revision, and if the authors do not seriously look at each and every comment and respond point-wise, it is highly likely the reviewer will give a negative response to reject the paper after revision. So I would, as an author, I would take each and every comment very, very seriously. But at the same time, I would be careful that I do not twist myself too much, yield to all the comments of the reviewer. Wherever I am able to rebut it, I will do it in a very polite way. Again, emphasizing the science of it, and be very careful in the language that I use to refute the comment.
Okay. There's one live question which has come up, that if a manuscript keeps on getting rejected, after how many times of submitting the manuscript should I stop submitting the manuscript? Yeah, Professor O.P. Singh?
It's very, if it is problem in methodology, and if it has been pointed out that, so I think you should stop. Because it cannot be what, Sandeep, we always talk about the articles which are salvageable, whether we can salvage the articles or not. So if there is start with the poor methodology, almost every journal is going to reject it. So no use sending it again and again. But if journal says that they do not have, they do have many articles, for that they are not publishing, seems sound. So if that kind of comment is there, you can go to another journal. But if methodology issues are there, you should not send it more than 2 journals, I think. In fact, 1 is sufficient. If there is methodological faults in your study, and without, because correcting them at a later stage is not possible.
Okay. Professor Venkat, how do you look at this?
Yeah, I concur with Professor Singh's comment. Maybe to get an unbiased opinion about it, once if I get a rejection, I will get that reviewed by one of my peers, the comments. And if it is a serious methodological issue, perhaps I have to stop. Suppose if it is more to do with a replicated study and things of that sort, and methodology wise it is fine, I think we can keep submitting as many options as we have.
Okay, thank you. There's one more question from one of the participants, that some authors prefer or like to cite their own articles, how it affects possibly the acceptance of the article or publication, and are there any guidelines to avoid such biased citations? Dr. Ajay Kumar has asked this question.
it is it's my view. I am not aware of any guidelines that forbids an author to not to cite their own work, but it has to be within the scope. It has to be very relevant. And whenever, as an editor, I come across an author or a group of authors citing their own work in the exclusion of all others, it is highly likely there may be some other methodological issues that will be seen in various parts of the study. And also, as an author, I have to be mindful that my article is likely to be reviewed by somebody who I have not cited, because that is something which many a time I try to do. I try to get it reviewed by somebody who has published in this area and who has not been cited, especially if the previous publication has happened within the past 1 to 2 years. So it is surprising. So it is highly likely your article is, my article is going to be reviewed by somebody I have not cited. So it is always better to have a balanced coverage. And generally, the articles that are getting accepted most often will have a balanced citation of all other people's work.
Okay. Yeah, Dr. O.P. Singh, how do you look at this?
Self-citation, if it is not always that there should not be self-citation, but as Dr. Venkat said, it should be relevant to the, should not be forced kind of self-citation, because does not help the journal also when we calculate the indexes agency calculate. So they try to self-cite, calculate separately. And again, other citations should be included, not only if you are self-citing too much, this gives an impression that you have some kind of grandiosity or some kind of thing which you are overstating. So,
okay. Yeah, Professor O.P. Singh, we are almost coming to the end of the webinar. Just two questions which are again coming up. What is IJP or IPS doing about conducting workshop about how to write and how to respond to the reviewers? What does IJP and IPS is doing for that? And are we coming up with any COVID issue, especially talking about the methodological issues related to surveys and other things?
There are two things. First, what IPS doing, you know that we are conducting almost 3 hours, 4 hours workshops in NCIPS to open to all the people. And we want registration, we are giving certificate also. We try to do with every kind of journal conference also, we will do it. But point is that people find only interest when their articles are rejected. But learning the methodology, there is some problem. So we are doing, IPS is always ready to help our readership, students. For students, we will be conducting workshop. Even IJPM and others journal also conduct workshop. So there are a lot of workshops being done, and maybe after COVID or online workshop also we are planning. So every 3 months there will be one workshop for people to attend. So that I can promise. And regarding the COVID issue, what is happening actually, first we thought that we should wait for a COVID issue. Yeah. But then we thought that this topicality and the time is important. So now we are bringing out the last issue as COVID focused. This issue will be also COVID focused. So we'll try to take as much article as possible because we are not trying to delay it. And we have planned for a COVID issue, which is of international flavor, and work is being done on that, which will be a COVID special issue.
Yeah. Venkat, this question is for you. As a journal editor, how do you look at preprints? This question is from Dr. Sonia.
I think preprints, in my view, should be encouraged because it helps the study to get somewhere published. My manuscript gets published in one of these preprint servers, and these days we also see, despite preprints, preprint servers mentioning that these are peer-reviewed, they still get cited. So that makes an author quite encouraged. It builds some kind of credibility, especially if it is cited by people whom we do not know. Okay. So that's my take. I think we should encourage preprints. I think the system will evolve towards more more transparent, open review system where there is an interactive review which is happening, corrected. Some of the journals have started following it, but it has its own challenges, like Professor Singh mentioned in his EIPS comments. I concur with his comments. But over the course of time, perhaps these things, preprint is a first step towards that.
Okay. Dr. O.P. Singh, how do you look at the preprint?
Again, I concur with Professor Venkat that obviously some journals are good which are doing that, and some journals are reputation is important. So whether peer review is being followed or not.
Okay. And one of the participant has asked this question that should one wait for making presentations in the conferences before submitting the paper to the journal, or they should directly go for submission rather than going through the path of presenting in conference and then publishing it? Professor Venkat, how do you look at this?
I think if there is an opportunity, it will be good to get the paper presented in a conference, so that it is something like a peer review where we get some feedback, we may get some new ideas how to write the discussion. We may be made to be aware of certain limitations which we can, if possible, if those limitations are that can be corrected, and or at least can discuss when we submit the manuscript. But it is not mandatory that I will wait for a conference, present it, and then go and then submit it. So I think it is preferable. If there is an opportunity, perhaps I would do that before submitting it. And it is always possible that if there are some new researchers that I come across who are experts in their field, they can be potential reviewers, because these are people who are not associated with us. They probably have a neutral perspective, and they can be cited as a potential reviewers. So that will make the editor's job also easier, especially people with the track record of research in the back.
Dr. O.P. Singh, your remarks on this?
We cannot wait for the conference. That is the thing, because the opportunities are limited in presenting in conferences. So you can, in fact, submit also, because you have yourself have analyzed the presentation which ultimately go to print. So I think that you may wait.
Okay.
You can send, because even for PGs, MCI requires both. One article you have to send to a journal, and one article you have to present. So depending on the time of your article, if it is nearer to the conference, so you present and then send.
But some authors just want to know that, in fact, some journals require that the paper should not have been published, presented in any conference. So how do you look at that?
That is not our policy.
Yeah, Venkat. Venkat? I think Venkat is not there. See, again, I just like to respond to this question that if it varies from journal to journal, but usually journals just want you to mention in your covering letter that whether this paper was presented anywhere or not. It is never held against the author that you presented the paper in some conference. So that's not the policy. With this, I think we had a lively discussion among all of us, and we had a lot of questions from people which we have tried to cover. With this, now I hand over to Professor G. Prasad Rao, the chairperson of this webinar, for his closing remarks.
When three rich, academic, and very
You are not audible. Can you just?
Hello. Am I
Yeah.
now audible?
Yeah, slightly better.
Yes, sir. Better.
Yeah. Okay. I would like to close with this beautiful sentence that I think there will not be such a great three panel who have contributed to the growth of science of psychiatry in this country. Sandeep Grover, O.P. Singh, and of course Venkat. They have actually summarized, and most of their answers are very precise. There was no going around, and very clearly, I think it would be helping to all the young research and psychiatrists. And I thank all the organizers, especially Mahesh Gowda and his team, for picking the correct people. And I'm sure, I think most people will go home with learning how to write, how to pick up a scientific research problem, and how to even look for the comments, apart from a lot of other things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mahesh, it's up to you now.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Prasad Rao, for agreeing to chair and actually making it very productive. And your blessings for this program is wonderful, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
I'm always there. Yeah.
And Dr. Sandeep, at his best, has moderate this program extremely well. And with his experience of handling so many journals, I know a lot of editors who are associated with one journal, but Sandeep Grover's hands and legs are at different journals. He's almost like an octopus with so many tentacles around. So he's capturing most of the market there. And his presence here has really added a lot of value. And he's actually grilled the panelists really well. His questions were really well thought of. Thank you, Dr. Sandeep, for agreeing to moderate this wonderful session for us.
Thank you.
And thank you, Dr. O.P. Singh, being at the helm of affairs at Indian Journal of Psychiatry, and your quick transition into this journal and making this journal really productive, efficient, and in terms of people's acceptability and the acceptance rate, all these things have changed with your intervention. IJP will definitely remember your contribution towards this journal, and you have a lot of time to come ahead, is what I think. So thank you, Dr. O.P. Singh, sir.
Thank you, Mahesh, for really organizing such a nice seminar, and Professor Venkat, Jipsad Rao, Sandeep, and also Dr. Harish. So thank you all for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Venkat, for agreeing to be with us. Being a clinician, heading so many projects at NIMHANS and keeping himself busy, and also contributing significantly to the academia also is important from Dr. Venkat. He's actually had a good blend of academics and clinical work. Thank you, Dr. Venkat, for agreeing to be one of the panelists today.
Thanks, Mahesh. I think it was a wonderful session. Personally, I learned a lot through the interaction. Professor Singh, elucidated several points, and the questions by Dr. Sandeep were very incisive. And thanks. I think it was a learning opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Wonderful having all of you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Ganesh.
Again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ganesh.
Thank you.
Bye, sir. Good night.
Good night. Good night, OP, everyone.
Good night, boss.